The stream is live.
Yes.
All right. Happy Mobiversary, everyone. I'm DePelsh Magruder, the founder of Mob United. We're just going to give people a few minutes to come in to join because we're going to have a very exciting, interesting conversation this evening. Just give me a minute to share on my page. And I'm going to introduce our guests in a few minutes. Um, so, this is a few minutes to come in. Uh-oh, hear background noise. Hopefully that won't continue. So today is our 8th Mobiversary. That's what we call it, our Mobiversary. It's 8 years since the initial founding of Moms of Black Boys United, and I could not be more excited. It's hard to believe that much time has passed. Sincerely hard to believe that much time has passed. You know, a lot of nonprofits don't make it this long. A lot of people who meet on the internet don't stay together this long. As a reminder, we started as a private Facebook group that went viral during the summer of 2016 and became a national movement and organization. And I'm just so proud and so pleased to say that we are still at it 8 years later, advocating for fair treatment of Black boys and men, advocating for society to see our sons as fully human, to recognize their full humanity, advocating for them to be treated fairly by law enforcement and those in authority. And our struggle continues. I mean, if you look at what's going on in society today versus 2016, there have been a lot of gains in terms of, in particular cases, law enforcement being held accountable for the deaths of Black boys and men. But if you look at the broader picture, like everything that we stand for is kind of under attack right now. So we have to be even more vigilant, even more focused and purposeful in our work. And I just want to take a moment, first of all, to acknowledge and thank everyone who's been on this journey with us, because it is a journey. And I just want to thank all of you for the support, for the sisterhood, for the ongoing advocacy, for the energy you poured into this, and just say that we need you to stay on the journey with us. So much has happened since we started in the summer of 2016. We've been through 2 presidential elections here in the US, and we're about to go through another very significant presidential election. We've been through a global pandemic, something nobody saw coming. Like, we were in the midst of building our chapters and moving into communities, and then the whole world shut down and we had to reset and go back virtual. We've lost one of our national leaders, Vivian. I want to honor the memory of Vivian Sullivan Wangpa, who was one of our national leaders and passed away a couple of years ago, tragically. We've all experienced some kind of loss. I lost my husband and my father in the past 3.5 years. Several people have lost parents and relatives. We've been through illnesses. We've been through divorces. We've had a few people get married. Shout out to Beth, who's behind the scenes. You can't see her, but she's here with us running tech. And, you know, through it all, one thing that remains constant, and that is our commitment to this work, our commitment to continuing the fight, continuing the struggle, continuing to advocate for our sons, our sunshines, as we call them. So, again, I just want to say thank you. And I also want to say that I was not supposed to be here tonight. Kimberly Robinson Alexander, who is historically our first full-time executive director, our first full-time paid executive director. She was hired within the past year. So we're very proud of that milestone. It's a really big deal, and she's doing an amazing job. If you have been following Mob United at all, you've seen her a lot. You see her voice, you see her presence. You see she is all over the place, all over this country, representing the organization and really trying to build partnerships and you know, sell our mission to a variety of constituents and partners. So proud of her. And she was supposed to be here tonight, except she is trapped due to Hurricane Beryl, trying to get back from Minnesota. So this weekend she spent it with Mama Valerie Castile, who is the mother of Philando Castile, who, again, if you've been following us, you know that it was his death and Mama Castile's pain and mourning that birthed our movement. So it's only fitting that Kim would be there in Minnesota this weekend, spending this time honoring the legacy and the life of Philando Castile. So she's been there for a series of events to honor him and spending time with her, and got trapped at the airport. And her flight is somewhere on the way back to Houston. So I'm jumping in to host tonight. And it's also fitting because in addition to Miss Castile, we've met many mothers along the way who have experienced loss, who've lost their sons tragically, unfairly, suddenly, and who've really taken that loss and built it into a story of survival, a story of advocacy of their own, a movement of their own. And one of those mothers is here with us tonight, Dannielle Brown. So I'm so excited to be in conversation with Dannielle tonight. She has a very special place in the history of Mob United. I can't remember what year we met, but you can tell us. But a few years ago, we've been in touch for quite a while, and her story is just so powerful and so moving, and tragic, which you will hear. But the way she has come out of that with such strength and force, I think, is a lesson for all of us. So I look forward to getting into the conversation. And Dannielle, maybe if you can just start, just tell us a little bit about yourself. I'll just start with one thing. One thing we share in common is that you're also a Howard Bison.
Yes.
Yes,
You.
you know. So, so you could take it from there, but tell us a little bit about yourself first and your
Okay,
family.
okay, great. I am Dannielle Brown. I live in Washington, D.C. And Del Pelcia is correct. Mob has been a huge support for me. But my introduction to Mob didn't come at the loss of my son. My introduction to Mob came because there was a necessity to protect our boys during a time when our boys was vividly under attack. Like we were seeing it across social media in our own backyards and hitting on our own streets and in our own family. And so I thought it was very imperative to connect to an organization that supporting what I love, a mother of two black young men at the time. So I joined Mob not realizing that I would need you all.
Wow.
So so my introduction to Mob came from being a participant, being a supporter, believing in the organization, wanting to connect with other women who also wanted to protect their children and their sons and their nephews and their neighbors' sons and nephews.
Hmm.
So, this is what initially brought me to you all. Then
Wow.
tragedy happened,
Yeah.
and I got to know you all on a personal level.
Wow.
And it
That is
was,
really something.
yes.
So before we get into what happened, tell us a little bit about your two sons.
Okay, so I have a 31-year-old. Lord.
Wow.
His name is Jamal. Jamal is a young equestrian. He rides horses. He's been riding ever since he was 6. Right now, he owns several horses. He works as a analyst for a major utility company, so he's thriving. Jalen, we call him Angel Jalen.
Hmm.
That's my son, Marquis Jalen Brown. He he was 21 for 24 hours. That's the best
Hmm.
way I can say it.
Hmm.
So he's not with us, but he is with us. His spirit is in everything. His spirit is what motivates me to do what I'm doing now, and that is advocacy. I didn't wake up into this. I didn't ask for it,
Right.
but this is who I am now. And it's because of, he went higher to look after me. And I stayed here to do what I need to do to make sure that his brothers and sisters are protected. More importantly, his black brothers.
Yes, I see you. I see you out there, and I want to hear all about your advocacy work. But first, I'm going to ask you to do the difficult thing that I know you've done many times, but it's not easy, and tell us what happened to Marquise Jalen. I know he was 21. He was a student at Duquesne University in Pittsburgh, and one night, sounds like it was right after his birthday, you got a call, and what were you told happened that night?
Well, when I got the call, the first thing I was told was that my son jumped.
Hmm.
And any, as a mom, I was just in Hawaii with my son. My son never had any suicidal uh, talks in his whole life or hinted to it or played with it. It
Hmm.
was his birthday. I had just spoken to him. He wanted me to cash app him to get his hair cut. He was excited that his older brother was coming into town for homecoming. He was 21. He had all these plans on paper. So when I got a call that said my son jumped out of 16th floor window, it just didn't make sense to me.
Mm-hmm.
And without having all the information, I made the school take that statement out.
Mm.
Because until I had an opportunity to understand what happened, I did not want them to put that statement out to say that my son jumped,
Right.
because it appeared to be suicidal. And I
Mm-hmm.
knew that was not the case.
Mm.
So
So
once
what did you do next? Like once you asked them to remove the statement, then what was your next step, and how did they approach? Well, were they planning to do an investigation, or did you force an investigation? And how did you navigate that in that moment while dealing with what was had to be the most difficult news you'd ever heard?
well, two things. The long journey there is when my son didn't die on the scene. He had
Mm.
passed in the hospital. So the long from here to Pittsburgh is like 4.5 hours. And I got the call that he left us. Upon getting on the scene, upon getting there, then the information came quickly to me that he was under a substance, and so quickly I had to start putting pieces together. And then I found out ultimately that it was four people in the room with him. In his room, his dorm size room was this small. Anyone who has a kid in college, and as we would know, Del
Right.
Pelcia, we
Yeah.
know how small a dorm room is. So
Mm-hmm.
for my son to have jumped in front of three officers, one school official, in the middle of Black Lives Matter, where the minute that you get up and do anything,
Mm.
they're on you. So I was
Mm-hmm.
told that my son got up off the bed, went and picked up a chair, pulled the chair back, hit the window, then put the chair down, stood on top of the chair, and
Mm.
proceeded to go out the window on a 16-story floor. But
Mm-hmm.
by the way, half of the window is intact.
Mm.
So immediately, that's a questionable death for me.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a mom who has a master's in counseling psychology, prior law enforcement, intelligence officer,
Well.
does currently investigations right now, have a history of doing investigations. The pieces did not add up. The
Yeah.
fact that he had that much time to pick up a chair, and by the way, the chair never left the window.
Mm.
So then we go down this rabbit hole of this mom wanting answers and not being able to access those answers because of it's a private institution. It's a Catholic institution. And I'm
Mm.
not, trying to speak against the religion or anything, but the Catholic institution have a long history of being able to keep files closed. And
Mm-hmm.
in this case, I didn't get access to information, nor did the private investigator that I hired was able to get access to information,
Mm.
which out of frustration led me to do what I needed to do to get answers. And the only way that I could think to get answers was to utilize my First Amendment rights.
Okay. And were they, before we get to that, were they actively investigating, or did they consider the case closed because they said this is what happened? There's no further information. Were university police investigating, or local police at all? Or were you the only one requesting information?
They were called in, but they didn't do a thorough investigation. It's almost as if they took their statements
Mm-hmm.
and went
The
with it.
local police, you mean,
The
like
local
local?
police.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
Again, because this is a private institution. And
Right.
mind you, as a private institution, a lot of their law enforcement officers are there as moonlighting. So
Okay.
they're state officials,
Mm-hmm.
but sometimes they moonlight, and they moonlight at these universities.
Okay.
Sometimes they're retired officers at these universities.
Right.
So they're carrying weapons. So there are, you know, police officers, but the title is campus or public safety officers, but they're police officers
Right.
and they carry weapons and they can arrest you and they
Mm-hmm.
have arrest powers. So backstory real quick. So my son was under the influence of something. Before they got there, he was skipping up and down the hall, knocking on windows. I mean, knocking on doors, just up and down the hall. He wasn't thinking about going out of a window.
Mm-hmm.
However, these four officers behind closed doors, no body cameras, somehow my son managed in front of four people to go out a window.
Mm.
So
Yeah. So tell me what happened next. You said you decided you had to use your First Amendment rights. So what did you do?
well, I went to Pittsburgh. I wanted answers. It was again George Floyd had just kicked off a whole revolution.
Okay.
Um,
So this happened in 2018, right?
yes,
Initially. So now you've been asking for information for 2 years at this
two
point
years. Yep.
and not
So
getting anywhere, not
I'm not
satisfied with
getting there.
the answers you're getting. So
Nope,
in
I didn't.
2020,
Nope.
okay.
I kept knocking on doors, working with, different attorneys, trying to figure out, but getting closed doors is very red tape.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and getting growingly and managing my grief, managing my heartbreak.
For
You
sure.
know, I had checked out. So, part of that time was just checked out. I lost my son and in a world of disbelief,
Yeah,
there was no light switch for me to turn on during
of
that period of
course. And what was your relationship with your other son like at that time? And how did he process and handle the loss of his brother?
I think probably my other son felt that he lost his brother and mother because
Mm-hmm.
I simply could not be there for him as much as I probably should to help him navigate his own grief.
Mm-hmm.
Thankfully,
Yes.
I had support system, my mom, um, my cousins, my aunts. I had a family that supported my son and supported my mom who lost a grandson. But I wasn't able to be there for them. I literally checked out. I
Mm-hmm.
couldn't eat. I couldn't pray. I just operated through, like a robot.
Yeah.
But
And were
I
you able to work during that time, or how did you survive?
no, I had to take a leave of absence.
Okay.
Yeah. I um I had a lot of donate. I was federal government, so I
Mm-hmm.
had a lot of donated leave. By the time I think I was almost gone for maybe a year.
Mm-hmm.
By the time I went back to work, it was 2019 because this happened October 18.
Yeah.
So probably about September 2019, I went back to work. But I really couldn't function. I really wasn't there. I hold a high security clearance, and
Mm-hmm.
I just really wasn't there, and it wasn't fair to my job and the people that I work for within national security as a part of keeping our nation safe. I wasn't fully functioning at my best.
Yeah.
So,
Of course. Understandably. Like I can't even imagine anything worse. I
you
really
know,
can.
so one day it became too much. And again, George Floyd, we all watched what
Mm-hmm.
happened to George Floyd. And when he yelled for his mother, I broke.
Mm.
I literally broke. I was probably one of the first 50 people down at the White House. I just got up, grabbed my keys, and went straight to the White House. I don't know why. It was just
Wow.
automatic response. I grabbed my keys, went straight to the White House, And before you know it, that little park in front of the White House in Washington, D.C., thousands, hundreds of people to thousands started gathering. And then we were there almost every single day. And
Mm-hmm.
then I grabbed my son's jersey and I showed up at the White House because I wanted answers and I wanted to be seen and I wanted my son to not be forgotten and that his name be said and that people know what happened to him. But
Mm-hmm.
again, I'm in Washington, D.C. This happened in Pittsburgh at
Right.
the school. It wasn't good enough. I kept trying to find how I could let this pain out, but I couldn't find, you know, I couldn't find the right avenue to say, hey, something happened to my child and it's not right and I don't have answers and it simply don't make sense. The
Yes.
math is not mathing, the evidence is not matching. None of it makes sense how my son life ended in front of four people in a chair that never left the window and half of the window intact.
Mm-hmm.
Something wasn't right. And so how did my son get in the state where he was might have under the influence? My son don't do drugs. He was a D1 football player. They get drug tested all the time. I believe he was at a celebratory for his birthday, and maybe somebody might have slipped something to him or something was tainted
Yeah.
because he got up immediately where he was. And that's how he got back to his room, is because he felt something was wrong and not right. And he felt he was not in a safe place. So where did he go? To his safe place, which is his dorm room. But
Mm-hmm.
by the time he got there and the elevator camera showed him just being very overly jovial, running
Mm-hmm.
up and down the hallways, just happy and dancing. None of that spoke to how he would switch and then just proceed to go out the window.
Right.
So back to George Floyd, that happened. I still wasn't getting any answers. It was 4th of July and something, they was talking about independence and I was talking about independent investigation.
Mm-hmm.
While the nation and the country was talking about their independence, I needed an independent investigation to what happened to my child, and I was willing to fund it.
Okay.
So, still not fully there, I grabbed my white rocking chair off of my screen porch. I put it in my car. I didn't know what I was going to do. I was going to go to Home Depot and get chained and chain myself to the bridge. I don't
Mm-hmm.
know what I was going to do, but I needed answers and I couldn't sit with it anymore. I didn't tell anyone. I didn't tell my mom. I didn't call. I didn't dial a friend. I just reactionary grabbed that white chair, put it in my car, went to Pittsburgh, went to Freedom Corner where a couple of weeks ahead I had did a march there to the school to get answers for my son,
Mm-hmm.
or to get their attention that I was a mom that I tried to let the investigation take its place. It was going slow and closed doors, no answer. Almost as if they was letting the statute of limitation run out,
Mm-hmm.
which is another tactic that happens so often in the Black
And how
community.
long is the statute of limitations in a case like this?
2 years
Okay.
for
Yeah.
wrongful death,
Right.
questionable death, if you don't have a murder suspect.
Okay.
Murder, there's no statute of limitations. But again, they were not looking at this case as murder. They was looking at it as he went out a 16th floor window in front of four officers.
Right.
That part brings in that wrongful death piece because they did not keep my son safe.
Mm-hmm.
And they had every means to do that.
Yeah.
Proximity, and which is why I always ask the question, where were you in the small size room?
Mm-hmm.
Where were you? So
And what did they say? Did you get to speak to the officers who were there in the room directly? And If so, what did they say when you asked how this could happen with 4 people in the room?
Private institution, no independent investigation, no opportunity to speak to the officers, which
Mm-hmm.
is also a reason why I took my rocking chair to Pittsburgh and parked myself at Freedom Corner. I didn't know what I didn't know when I took that rocking chair, I stopped at a rest stop because I realized I hadn't eaten in a couple of days.
Mm-hmm.
So I went and got a slice of pizza. I bit into that pizza and I almost became sick. I couldn't swallow it.
Mm.
And it was at that point on, I didn't know, like I said, I had went to Home Depot and bought a chain to chain
Right.
myself to the bridge. That's how determined I was. I wanted to know what happened to my child. When
And
I
what date was this? Because this is getting ready to kick off something very interesting that people may not
4th of
expect.
July,
So this is the 4th of July, 2020. You
4th of
drive to Pittsburgh with a white rocking chair and plant yourself in the middle of Freedom Square in Pittsburgh.
Yep. And when I planted my chair, I knew I was doing a hunger strike. I did
Mm-hmm.
not know that until I bit into that pizza and didn't swallow
Mm-hmm.
it and spit it out. And that's when I got my answer. I just won't eat. I
Mm-hmm.
won't eat. And if they're gonna take my son's life, I was prepared for my life to go right along with him because I was gonna let. I said, you took my son on your because Freedom Corner where the school is a walking distance. Like I was
Mm-hmm.
sitting at Freedom Corner in a rocking chair, looking at the dorm room window that my son came out of. So in my mind, until my last breath, I needed to know what happened to my son, and I was willing to not eat until my last breath. And I was so shut out from any. My mom couldn't say anything to me. My other son couldn't say anything to me. No one could reach me. I think a couple of you all tried to. No one could reach me. That's how determined I was. I sat, it was 4th of July. The fireworks were doing what they do. Then it poured down rain, and I sat in that rocking chair under thunder, no umbrella, no nothing. And I told God, I said, God, it's me and you. It's me and you. I want to know what happened to my son, or I will be with my son.
Mm-hmm.
And from there, I didn't call anyone. I just rocked in that rocking chair while police kept going up and down the street. They would look at me and say, what in the world, this lady sitting in the rocking chair? And it became days, 2 days that
Yeah.
I sat in that rocking chair. Finally, someone was taking pictures, Brother Ash was taking pictures at Freedom Corner. And he finally said to me, he's a journalist. And he
Mm-hmm.
finally said to me, he was taking pictures for a fashion clothing line. He said, what are you doing? Why are you sitting in the middle of Freedom Corner in a rocking chair?
Mm-hmm.
And that's when I finally opened my mouth. And by the time I told him what I was doing, he made a phone call. The news media came, and then people from all over Pittsburgh started coming with water and tent and umbrella for me to sit under. And then they started bringing their own. They bought a tent for me to sleep in, and then they started bringing their own tents. And before you know, we had a tent city. And then from there, we grew to doing actions. And from there came my demands of
Mm-hmm.
when I would eat if these demands were met. And that was an independent investigation, body cameras for officers. No officer should have a weapon. And just because you're at a private institution, if you have a weapon and you are also a part of a bigger policing organization, you should have a body camera. Should be never be a deceased child against an officer's story,
Yeah.
account. My child can't say what happened. So, and then mental health training and crisis intervention, because clearly if my son was on something, where was the crisis intervention?
Mm-hmm.
Because at that point, four people in a small sized dorm room, my son could have picked up a knife. He could have picked, even if he picked up the
Right.
chair. Now, I don't know what's going on in Pittsburgh, but if this was Washington, D.C. or any other major city, you
Yeah.
pick up a chair, they all on you.
Right. With officers, right? You pick up a chair, they're gonna assume it's a weapon most of the time.
Yes. So no taser, no nothing. You just
Mm-hmm.
so again, I did this whole diagram. Where were you? You just sat
Mm-hmm.
there and watched my son pick up a chair, go across the room, a small size room. You know how much power you have to break a window?
Yeah.
You have to have so much power that that chair should have went out that window with
Mm-hmm.
him. But I couldn't hire a fall specialist. Oh, but you know what? It didn't matter because my training and my background was sufficient enough to tell me my son landed on his back. It's
Hmm.
no way you go out the window face forward and you do a somersault and land on your back. His whole front was clear when I seen him land in the bed.
Hmm.
So it told me immediate, and he only had a small gash right here. So
Mm-hmm.
it told me my son must have been knocked unconscious. They rushed him. Half of the window, which is why half of the window is intact, which is why he landed on his back. As a
Mm-hmm.
mom, you know your child could be somewhere and you get an inclination and you be like, something's wrong with my child. Or I know what, as a mom, you know what happened to your child. It was clear to me. It was clear to me what happened.
Mm-hmm.
However, I didn't have the support to really fully, without a body camera, which is the number one support. I didn't have that. And even though in cases we know of, they're like uh um George Floyd, and there were body cameras, doesn't always, lead to. I'm thinking about Eric Gardner right now, where
Right. Yes.
body camera clearly captured it. And in a lot of cases, body cameras are capturing it, but it doesn't, translate into a conviction.
Right. But at least you want to have that as a starting point.
As
So we can
exact
debate what happened. Yeah.
for the moms,
Mm-hmm.
for a mom, at least, provide that. So at the very least, even though justice might not be served, the world, this mom,
Mm-hmm.
know what you did.
Yes.
And so that was my advocacy. Those were my demands. Crisis intervention. No way you're going to come on someone and the end result is their death when you
Mm-hmm.
found them running up and down the hallway.
So I
So,
just want to note that the things you said are several of the things that Mob United has been advocating for over the past 8 years. Things like body cams, crisis intervention training, de-escalation training, racial bias and diversity training, and a whole host of other things to hold officers accountable. But I want to go back to you for a minute and your journey to Pittsburgh and sitting um, in the square. I was following you online the whole time. Yes, we were very worried about you. We were praying for you. We were trying to get people to talk to you and, very worried that you weren't going to make it, honestly. And I just want to know, as you were advocating, like how did you survive that? Like, what was your mental state at the time? I'm sure having people come and rally around you and see you and acknowledge your story helped you to stay afloat, but just take us inside that time because I don't know how long you expected it to last either, like when you started the hunger fast, but my memory says it ended up being a very long time, like 200 days of a hunger fast and being outside, right? So tell us about that aspect and how you made it through.
well, unfortunately, in our community, sometimes we question, the authenticity of one's actions. And people were saying, how could you survive 237 days on a hunger strike? You should have been dead after 5 days. That's
Mm-hmm.
not necessarily true. if you go in third world countries, people have survived longer than that, starving.
Mm-hmm.
And how I survived was on sugar water. So I
Mm-hmm.
had lemonade, iced tea, a lot of soda. I had to drink soda. Um, High sugary lemonade is the one, because anybody who was with me on at Freedom Corner knew it was lemonade.
Okay.
But no dairy products, no anything that was life sustaining. I wouldn't even drink Gatorade. I wouldn't
Mm-hmm.
drink any electrolytes, anything that had any life sustaining elements attached to it. I wouldn't drink. Um, I was fortunate to have a Dr. Wagner to come on day three. He had gotten word, and
Mm-hmm.
he came on day three of the hunger strike and followed me throughout the hunger strike. And I needed him to do that because I needed him to document my journey so that I did not want anyone to take away from what I was doing and try to say, it was false or it wasn't, legitimate.
Mm-hmm.
So, and let me just put this plug in. I am the only Black woman who survived 237-day hunger strike intentionally as a social justice action, who's not incarcerated, because we
Yeah.
don't have incarcerated numbers um,
Mm-hmm.
in the world, without a feeding tube put in her. And what happened was my body started shutting down. You can survive on
After how long did that happen?
um my body, I started getting vertigo really bad. I started having spasms, and which I still have spasms a lot till
Mm-hmm.
this day. I started having I had a seizure, and it would knock me like literally on the floor. I would wake up and be like, stuff would be on my mouth, and I didn't know I had went into a
Mm-hmm.
seizure until the doctor told me. So it was a seizure and a really bad vertigo episode that landed me in the hospital, because that at that time my body started shutting down. No longer, I mean, you can only survive on sugar drinks and salt, but for so long. And that's what
Mm-hmm.
I was doing. But my system was like, now I wasn't having bowel movements anymore. My doctor told me not to drink water anymore. He was like,
Really?
water is not doing anything for you, you know.
Okay.
So I had
Was
to,
he telling you to drink something else or?
yes, the
Okay.
sodas.
Okay.
I mean, that's all he could advise me is that, if I want to prolong the hunger strike, I
Mm-hmm.
have to make sure I have salt and water in my body.
Okay.
But it's not something one can survive on for a very long time, because of course your organism need more than that, or
Right.
it's going to start eating or feeding itself,
Mm-hmm.
which mine started to. I was malnutrition, nutrient deficient. My thiamine, I wasn't really thinking right, which was causing the headaches and the vertigo and the seizures, because my body was starving. And then
Yeah.
my stomach started getting, I that little pot belly thing. It's a very difficult word that they call it. But it started getting that, and I, was wrapping it so it didn't get really big,
Mm.
wrapping it with those belts. I remember telling one of the young ladies at Freedom Corner to get me a I don't know what you call them, sweat belts you put
So
around your
like a
stomach,
waist trainer or?
like a waist trainer.
Oh
Yeah.
no.
So I had to wrap that up. So yeah.
And
So that
did you consider stopping at this point? Like once you see you're on the brink of actually on the brink of death, did you consider stopping?
no.
And what was going on with your advocacy at that point? You're making these demands. Were you making any progress with the demands?
Yes. By this time, several things. So we did a student march, and we hit all the universities within that area Parkview University. Um, uh, I'm forgetting some of them, but we
Mhm.
hit a lot of the universities there. Oh my God, there's one that's I really want to say again with a C. Um, it did University of Pittsburgh. We were hitting all of those universities, and one of the universities had a meeting, and they said, well, two of them. University of Pittsburgh changed their public safety laws or rules on their web page to reflect that they put body cameras in place. University of Pennsylvania, Penn State,
Mhm.
all of these universities started sending me letters or coming to me and telling me that they have you know changed their public safety to include body cameras,
Mhm.
to include Duquesne
Mhm.
said that they were going to get body cameras,
Mhm.
which is a good thing. And so yes, things were changing, and I seen the things change that way. But remember, my reason for being there is I wanted to know what happened to my son.
Right.
So I was parked there hoping that the officers would come to me at Freedom Corner and speak with this mother, even if it was in
Right.
confidence. You
Mhm.
know, come talk to me. Those people in the room, I wanted to be there.
Mhm.
I was inaccessible in DC. I
Did you
had
know
to.
their names? Was there any way for you to know who was in the room, or was that secret information as well?
That was withheld from me. And then that information was in a report, but it was didactic.
Mhm.
Their names wasn't.
Didactic. Yeah. Mhm.
Yeah. So I'm sorry. So and side point. I struggle even with my speech now for the lack of the thiamine from the hunger strike.
Mm.
So some things I had to, it misfires,
Mhm.
especially when it comes to my speech because of the deficient how I sent my body through such a traumatic process. Um, but yeah, I wanted them to come to see me. I wanted to be there. And believe it or not, someone did come and see me. And it
Mhm.
was the person the maintenance person who was told to knock out the window. And he was like, your son, and I'm not going to say his name because he came,
Mhm. Mhm.
but he said, impossible, impossible,
Really?
impossible that a chair could do that.
Mm.
And I don't want to go too much into
Yeah.
that part,
Yes, I know.
but let me just say this. Not only that person, but several other people came to me to give an account of what happened that got him in a place where he was not himself.
Mhm.
And also after the fact.
Mhm.
So,
Is there any more you can say about that? Like what got him to that point?
um, again, one account was he took 2 puffs of marijuana. But and that's like 2 puffs of marijuana we know does not cause
Yeah.
marijuana. First of all, is a downer.
Right. Yeah.
It doesn't cause excitability unless that marijuana is tainted with
Yeah.
something.
Laced with something else. Yeah.
Yeah, and by the
Mhm.
time the autopsy report, they said it was only minimum traces, which was
Mhm.
consistent with 2 puffs, where you have
Mhm.
minimum traces because they could track marijuana because it's a plant.
Mhm.
But what's laced with it, your body breaks down and they can't test for. They can't test for K2. They can't test for LSD. They can't test for those
Really? Okay.
because it's a chemical.
Mhm.
It's not a natural plant. You can test for cocaine because cocaine comes from a poppy plant. You can test again for anything that comes from a mushroom. You can
Mhm.
test for that because it's a living mushroom, plant. So So that's why they just say he had minimum marijuana in his system.
Yes.
So,
So
but we
you got some answers. You got some
right,
answers that validated what you thought. Did you get enough information? And how did this fast end?
this fast ended with me on the floor. And I knew within myself. I called I called two of the people who were with me on this journey. They were my, right hand, left hand person that I met in Pittsburgh. They were very dedicated individuals, and I called them and I was like, "It's time. I have to go to the hospital because this last seizure. I couldn't remember. I got up off the floor, but I never remember how I got there.
Mm-hmm.
And I will admit that it kind of scared me.
Mm-hmm.
So I went, but I struggled going because I knew when I went, a decision had to be made at
Yeah.
that time. I knew I went as far as I could go, and now I literally had to come to myself, like come to Jesus moment. And
Mm-hmm.
when I got there, they immediately put IV in me and did that, but they did not give me any. I was just heavily dehydrated.
Mm-hmm.
They did not give me any, a life sustaining anything. But the
Mm-hmm.
doctor came in, Dr. Wagner, and then the doctor came in and said, you know, we gave you salt and sugar, electrolytes to hydrate you,
Mm-hmm.
but we're not going to keep you unless you eat. Because if you're not going to eat, then you'll just have to go back out there. There's no
Mm-hmm.
need for them. It was my choice, my decision,
Right. Yeah.
and they were going to, respect that. But I had to make a choice.
Mm-hmm.
And I tell this story all the time. I remember when I was out of it, that Jalen came to me, and Jalen was reaching for me, and I
Mm-hmm.
was reaching for him. But as I was reaching for him, it was almost if we were reaching for each other, but being pulled back from each other. And I
Mm-hmm.
fell into Jamal's arms.
Wow.
And so that's when I said, I have to live because I could continue. First of all, Jamal needed me, and that's
Yeah.
probably the most realest time reckoning I had with my oldest son. If I want to be very honest, and I'm not proud of this, but he had been a non-factor in this fight because I was so focused
Mm-hmm.
on justice for Jalen that I wasn't a mom to him, but I always knew he had a grandmother, and his grandmother was his mom, and they had each other. So I felt that that was enough for them to comfort each other, and that
Mm-hmm.
they didn't need me, and I could put my whole attention on Jalen.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I fell into his arms, I realized I have another heartbeat that I have to live for. And grief will do that to you. Grief will knock you out to a point where you're so low and so stuck.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard to see anybody around you except being consumed by the heartbreak.
Yes. Yes.
And you have to fight your way back from that place of being stuck in that grief place where you could literally lose your life stuck there. And I know, grief.
Yes. That is very good advice. Very good advice. So you made the decision to live for yourself and for your other son. And tell us what your life has been like since then. Like how has this changed, this whole experience changed how you approach life, and how have you been spending your time?
And let me just go back because I want to shout out someone, Laura Rain. Thank you. Park Point and Carlo. Carlo had a security. When we did the student actions,
Mm-hmm.
Carlo University, the head of their security is a Black woman. She came, I thought she was approaching us to kick us off the campus. She was approaching me with her, and there's a picture out there with me and her taking a picture. She came to me with her chest stuck out, and she said, "You see what I got on?" And it didn't dawn on me. And she had on a body camera.
Oh, wow.
So
Wow.
I'm sorry. I
Yeah.
remember she typed it. I'm looking at the feed, and it was
Mhm.
Carlo, and and then Park Point, and then University of Pitt, and so all these schools, and then I was getting information from California about all these schools around the United States who carried weapons. Now we're ordering body cameras
Mm.
because they were watching what was happening in Pittsburgh, and they
Wow.
was watching to see if this mother was going to eat or not. And so I tell people all the time, there's no videos that because people say, "Oh, she had to be eating." I said, "Show the film." Because
Hmm.
see, when you are so
We
focused,
saw you disappearing. We saw you withering away before our eyes.
yeah. But when you're so listen, food didn't matter to me. When I talk about
Mhm.
grief and trauma, people who are in state of trauma, you always sometimes people are like, well, how could they listen? They're in a state of trauma.
Yeah.
Unless you're in a state of trauma, your only thought is, am I going to die or am I going to survive? There's no
Mhm.
middle ground. There's no middle ground. You go through a period where I don't care if I die. Today could be my last day. Grief will do that to you. Grief will have you say, I'm just waiting for my last breath.
Mm-hmm.
Somehow hope and
Mm.
inspiration seeps in, and it pulls you from that. It takes you from trauma to triumph, because then it starts weaving little stitches of purpose in you.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what happened to me when I fell in Jamal's arms. I understood then. Not only did I had another heartbeat, but also there was a greater message and a greater purpose, which I thank Ma so much for always supporting me. God supported me in my low point. You even gave me a platform at the Essence Fest
Mm-hmm.
to talk about justice for Jalen.
Yeah, that was a couple of years ago, right? Or
Yes,
right before the pandemic.
right before the pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
Powerful, you
Yeah.
know. So when I got invited to speak here, I said, "Oh, most definitely," because not only am I, it's a lot of mothers. I've connected to a lot of mothers you all have helped,
Mm.
and they're thriving today, and they're because of the support of other moms and having a safe place to come together
Yes.
to be able to touch the infirmities of each other's heart, even if it's to pray. That is powerful, but you all have gone beyond prayer. You all give prayer, you all have given money, you have provided legal assistance. I mean, outlets to be able to have a platform, to be able to conduct social justice programs, legal. I mean, Mob, you guys have touched so many areas of these mothers, and our my thing is, if something happened to one child, we all bleed.
That's
We
right.
all bleed.
That's right. And we're just so happy that we were able to connect with you and that you became a part of our community because your spirit and your story are so powerful. I know so many people are being blessed right now just by hearing your story. And if anyone has a question, please post it in the chat. Um, so tell us how, like, what have you found to be your purpose in the midst of all of this, and how have you been channeling your energy now that you've chosen life?
So I retired from the Department of Defense. And I still take on assignments, you know, moonlight, take on assignments here and there
Hmm.
cases. But outside of that, I also wrote a curriculum, a social justice curriculum, because a lot of people don't know. They want to stand up, they want to fight, but they don't know how to. They might not be the person that will walk in the streets and march, or out there very in the presence or social media, or I was there when the tear gas, when the marching, when the former president, look, I was like I don't know what the former president decided that it was okay to tear gas us at a peaceful march
Right.
on George Floyd. So
So
again,
what are some of the elements of your curriculum?
so teaching social justice, how you can be a advocate in any setting that you're in. You could be an advocate in corporate America. You could be an advocate at school. How to have your voice heard without the attachment of it always leading to something violent. Advocacy and
Hmm.
social justice is so much more than just marching, and rioting or any of that
Hmm.
that sometimes media like to portray. So I teach a course on how you can actually be an advocate and never leave your door, never leave your couch.
Hmm.
You can, that you have a voice, that there's something in you, advocacy in you for something, whatever that is. Save the whales, I don't know. But as Black people, it's our responsibility to support social justice and to be
Hmm.
an advocate. I believe it's our responsibility to take up some type of stance to make this planet, to make our people, to make our boys safe.
Yeah.
And the question is, if you don't know what it looks like, then let me help you get there. Let's look at how so many people were able to, and then we go into the history of some of the social advocacy people were able to do, from Dick Gregory, who I spent so much time with. You see pictures of me and him every once in a while.
Hmm.
Before my son's life was taken, I was spending time with Dick Gregory. So he would push back that plate in a second. He
Hmm.
used to walk me all the way. His favorite place, one of his favorite places, he liked to be in the streets. One of his favorite places to be able to eat free at the Union Station in the club. You can always catch him there. In the
Okay.
so, but he was always a teacher. And then of course, Howard University. You can't be a student at Howard University and not know social justice and advocacy.
That's right.
We were taught that by the best. Maya
Hmm.
Angelou, Nelson Mandela. When he came, I think you were there too when Nelson Mandela was free, and his first thought.
It was the year after I graduated. He was free the year I graduated, but he came the following year, and a group of students
Okay,
went
I
to
was
South
right
Africa.
there.
Yeah, a group of students went to South Africa the following year. So several people I know got to go.
Yes. So when
Hmm.
he came, he blew me away, and we all were like this on the
Yeah.
yard. So you
Sonia
cannot.
said she was there too.
Oh
What are you
yeah.
doing there, Sonia? You graduated already. But
You probably was there. You know how we graduated, but
and
it's some
still hang out.
unfinished business. No,
Right.
some unfinished business in the A building.
Yeah. So what you're saying is very powerful. We're going to have you come back on and talk about this social justice and advocacy toolkit because you're so on point. And one of the things I often say when I talk about starting Mob United, I remember saying at the beginning, like we got on the phone 2 days, not on the phone. I guess it was the phone because we were on freeconferencecall.com before we weren't on video initially. We were on an actual nationwide conference call on freeconferencecall.com. And um, everyone was saying like let's plan a march, and I just remember saying I'm not really a marcher, like, but I don't think that's the only way you can advocate. That's not the only way you can fight for social justice. There's so many ways. So depending on your talents, your personality, your skills, your connections. There are a lot of ways to be an advocate. So that's definitely one of the things we want to continue to teach people, like do it your way. There's not only one way. You don't have to be outside yelling through a bullhorn and hoping someone hears you. So one of the things we really emphasize is making sure you get to the decision makers and making sure you, wherever you are, you know who your local elected officials are. I just passed my state legislator on the way home around the corner and rolled down my window and spoke to her. But knowing who those people are, knowing how to get to them, knowing when they meet, and knowing what legislation is in motion at the local, state, and federal level, so that you can have your voice heard. Because a lot of times there are a lot of forums going on, but we have an opportunity to use our voice and we don't use it because we don't even know it's happening, and we don't take the time to organize and engage. So thank you for saying that, and I do want to have you come back to talk about that more, because that's very important.
Real quick, Florida, when they started taking the Black books out of the school system, what resulted from that? Then you had mobile Black history trucks going around educating our children. So also, one of the important things that comes out of advocacy is there's always good. This riot is not, burning down the buildings and all of that. That's yeah, I get it. It's real and it can happen, but that's not the end result.
Yeah.
There's so much good that could come out of just being an advocate and taking up the fist and the fight, wherever that looks like, to bring about social change. So I definitely want to say that. I also have so I have a master's in counseling psychology, but I decided not to practice where it's insurance or get into it professionally in the way of licensure and all of that, because I figured, what, now I probably need to use it on myself. But from that spun next chapter mental health counseling coach. So believe it or not, I have a lot of women who are going through the grief cycle of losing their child or losing a loved one. And they don't have the co-pays, or they can't wait a week to talk to their therapist again. I definitely advocate for them to be connected to a therapist and to get continuously mental health, treatment and guidance. But also in that in-between time, sound like a Ayana Van Zant, the
In
in-between.
the meantime, right.
In the meantime, they can contact me, and for like $25 for like an hour, they could get my ear, a safe place, and solutions and steps how to survive. When there seem not to be a light switch in the room that you're in, you know. So I have a lot of women that actually I coach, and encourage while they're in their journey. And some of them have, kind of got away. I was like, get back in therapy. They're like, you're my therapist. But
Yeah.
it's the problem. The thing is that it's because I've been there, and I can speak to them about that loss and how to take that loss and turn it into purpose, and how we're here just for a short time. We can't take any of this with us. We'll see our loved ones again, but just not yet. So we talk about what that not yet looks like and what we could do in the meantime.
Thank you so much, Dannielle. This has been so powerful. I am in awe of you. I admire you. I love you. And I thank you so much for continuing to be connected to Mob United. It means a lot to us. We're so proud of you, as people are saying in comments. And of course, want to continue to be in dialogue with you and to follow your journey, because I'm sure there is much more you have to offer the world, much more you're going to do to make a difference in this world and turning your pain into purpose. So just thank you so very much for spending this time with us. And this will be available. So everyone who's watching, please spread this far and wide, because people need to hear her story. And we're also just empowered and emboldened by the love the extent you went to demonstrate the love for your son kind of really, really, really crystallizes why we're here. Like, that's how much we care about this, right? That's the depth of a love of a mother and her son, and daughters too. I'm sure I don't have daughters; I have two sons, but it shows you how deep a mother. So we're willing to die for these children, and
Well,
we want
thank you,
the
Dale.
world to know.
Thank you, because it was the love of your boys that even birthed this organization. So I stand with probably everybody who's watching and who's in this organization. We have so much respect for you. And we thank you from the bottom of our hearts for giving us a platform and giving us an organization that we can support that represents our children and that advocates safe places for them. Oh, and can I share more quick story?
Yes, final words. Go
You
ahead.
were one quick story. Do you remember? I don't know if you remember, but it was a child who went away to school and was in a crisis with a police officer through mob. A mother who was in mob didn't know the family. The mom couldn't get there, but that mother was located in that city with that child. Left, went to that child, communicate with the mom that she did not know to say because this happened in I don't know what school
Yeah,
the
I can't remember
child.
what city. Yeah.
Do you remember that story?
Hmm.
That story. So if you want to know what mob represents, we're everywhere. And if your child is in trouble and you put a group text in the mob group text and say, my child is in Tennessee right now and is in trouble, and I need someone to go to and stand with my child until I can get there, a mom will go. That is powerful. And
Yeah.
that's because of you. This is because of the love and the passion you have for this organization. You gave us that. And we are forever humble and grateful.
Thank you. That's what it's all about. And it's because of all of us coming together as a community. That's what it's about, being a community of support and being there for each other on this motherhood journey. So I just want to encourage everybody to continue to engage in the organization, continue to make your voices heard. I have to say, one of the main ways you can make your voices heard this year is to vote. Vote in every election. Don't take your voice for granted. Speak out often and powerfully on the things that matter to you and that matter to all of us. So thank you again so much. I have to say, Kim, our executive director will be back next week. She's en route right now on a flight, so she'll watch this later and tell me how I did. But she
And
will
me
be back. She'll be back next week talking about her journey in Minnesota this weekend. She'll be sharing from her experience with Valerie Castile and telling us all about the memorial to Philando Castile and reflecting on that. So we look forward to that next Sunday, same time, same place. And until then, everyone, thank you so much. Happy, happy, happy anniversary, mobiversary. And thank you so much, Dannielle, for sharing your story and continue to do the great work and powerful work that you're doing.
thank you. Bye.
Bye bye.